Hi, this is Mr. Bledsoe, and in this video series I'm showing you some strategies you can use to solve word problems when you're stuck. And the word problems that we're looking at are all from the North Carolina Math 1 EOC, the 2016-2017 released items, and there's a link to that PDF below the video if you don't already have that. And in this video we're looking at problem number 2. And so the first thing I usually do is I'll just do a quick scan of the problem, and I can see on the paper here that I've got a graph of a straight line that's shaded underneath, which tells me that I'm probably looking at some type of inequality. All the shaded points represent points that are less than the value of the graph there, the value of that straight line. So something about inequalities, and as I look at the answer choices I've got there, it's something about pounds of apples and pounds of oranges. So, okay. So I've got something about, I think I've got something about inequalities. Let me just write that down. Inequality and something about, let's say, apples and oranges. Okay. So let's go ahead and read the problem. It's just one sentence. In fact, the sentence is just the question that I'm supposed to answer. What scenario could be modeled by the graph below? And then it has a picture of this graph here. Okay, so again, I see that the graph is this. It's a graph of an inequality. There's my shaded part right there. I'm thinking there's going to be a less than sign involved in here somewhere, because all these points here, since they're below the line, that tells me that it's something less than the value of the line. Okay. If I could come up with the actual equation for that line, that might be useful somehow. And I notice it crosses the y-axis at 5 and crosses the x-axis at 2.5. Okay, let me see what the scenarios here that are described in the answer choices. The number of pounds of apples, y, minus 2 times the number of pounds of oranges, x, is at most 5. That's answer choice A. And I noticed that all the other answer choices, they're all different, but they all have that same kind of, that same wording. Answer choice B says the number of pounds of apples, y, minus half the number of pounds of oranges, x, is at most 5. Okay, so all of them, the number of pounds of apples is y. So y, apparently, that's pounds of apples. And x is pounds of oranges. I'll just go ahead and write that on my graph here. And since they all say that same thing, y is the pounds of apples, x is the pounds of oranges. Well, I'm wondering if I could write each of my answer choices, instead of having them written out using English, the way they're written on the paper, I'm wondering if I could write them as equations, or maybe as inequalities. And then if I had that, and if I could come up with the inequality that matches this particular graph right here, well, then maybe one of my answer choices will match that graph. Okay. All right, so I'm going to start with my answer choices. So let's see. A, it says number of pounds of apples, y, minus 2 times, oh, this isn't looking too hard, y minus 2 times the number of pounds of oranges, x, so 2 times x is at most 5. Okay, I'm not sure how to write that. Is that supposed to be greater than 5 or less than 5? This looks like a less than inequality, so maybe it's supposed to be less. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be less than or greater than, so I'm just gonna write it as equal for now. I'm gonna say equals 5. Because the line itself is the equals part of the inequality, and the shaded part, it would be the less than, or maybe greater than, I'm not sure. But I'm just going to write that as equal, and I'll come back and change that later. All right, so that's A. That's my answer choice A. All right, B, I want to write that as an equation. Let's see. Number of pounds of apples, y, minus half the number of pounds of apples, 1/2 times x, is at most 5. All of these say at most 5. Let's see, C, number of pounds of apples, y, minus 2 times the number of pounds of oranges, y minus 2. Isn't that what I've got for x? Oh, y plus. Y plus 2x, and D is y plus half pounds of oranges is at most 5. Okay, so I've got my 4 scenarios written as equations. Technically they're supposed to be inequalities, but again, I'm not going to worry about that right now. And if I can figure out then what this, the equation for this straight line here, and if it matches one of these, then I'll be in business. Okay, so let's see. I've got a straight line. I notice it has a y-intercept of 5. Y-intercept is 5. And let's see, it's got a slope. The slope is negative something. I can tell it's negative because it's going in that kind of opposite way. So the slope is negative. I wonder if I can figure out exactly what the value of the slope is. And I think I can, because I can just read it off of the graph, because I noticed that the straight line actually crosses right over some of the hash marks that you can see on the page there. So it actually crosses this point right here, and it crosses this point right here. So if I start here at my y-intercept, I go down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1. So that's down 2 over 1. My slope is negative 2. Well, I've got a slope and a y-intercept. I can use the slope-intercept form of a straight line, and I can just plug in my slope and my y-intercept. So y equals, slope is negative 2x plus the y-intercept, which is 5. And so I have y equals negative 2x plus 5. So I have the equation of this line. Again, I've written it as an equation, and I know technically it's an inequality, but again, I'm going to kind of ignore that for now. Y equals negative 2x plus 5, and that doesn't match any of these. Okay, but this isn't written. Oh, so none of these are actually written in this same form. Okay, how about if I rewrite this so that I've got 5 by itself, and then maybe it will match one of these over here. So if I want to get the 5 by itself on this side of the equation, then I want to get rid of the negative 2x and have it over here. So if I add 2x to both sides of the equation, add 2x, then my 2x's go away on this side of the equation, and I've got y plus 2x on this side, and I've got 5 on this side, and boom. That matches answer choice C. All right. Now, notice some of the strategies that I used here when I was stuck on this problem. I noticed that I could come up with the equation of this straight line here, which turned it, because I could use the slope-intercept form, so I came up with, using this, I came up with the equation of that line. I also noticed that all of the different answer choices that I had, even though at first they looked kind of long and complicated, they really weren't, because in each one of them, the number of pounds of apples I was told was y, and the number of pounds of oranges I was told was x, so I could just immediately substitute y for the pounds of apples and x for the pounds of oranges, and I could immediately write each of these answer choices in a much simpler algebraic form. And then all I had to do was figure out a way to get this, my equation for this line, in the same form as the equation for this line right here, and I had my answer. Notice that even though this was an inequality problem, which we noticed early on when we were kind of doing the scan of the problem, even though this is an inequality problem, I didn't actually need to use my greater than or less than sign. all I needed to do was figure out what was the equation that went along with the graph of that straight line, and I could match that to one of my 4 answer choices over here.